welcome to the virtual stage, the beautiful Michelle Pontvert, or if I was to say it in my true language, Pontvert, which sounds semi-Australian, and I would almost say borderline bogan, but we have this beautiful soul who is a branding and web designer working with businesses who support mothers and babies who are ready to make a bigger impact. So Michelle not only works with mothers in this space, but she's also has design background in set decoration for film, as well as experience with working with small businesses on their marketing teams. So this hasn't just given her an avenue to work with the mamas that she does now, but I think the biggest takeaway that I got from her bio was just being able to step into emphasizing empathy when we're dealing with business. So it's really connecting to the human behind what they do, which is ironically a little bit like what this whole podcast is about. It's like, tell me why you do what you do and how you got there. So I know I didn't give a huge background to Michelle, but I'm going to introduce the beauty herself to tell you a little bit about her progress into her work, maybe even where she lives, and and all the fun stuff that comes within that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Pontvert with the French accent. Pontvert is just fine. I'm currently in Paris, France, which is where I've lived now for about 6 years. I'm an Aussie originally from Melbourne, and I grew up moving a ton. So I did my studies in the States. So a bit of everything, thus the slightly odd accent. And as you said, I started in film set decoration, which I really loved. It was such a creative field, but it became pretty apparent as I started working that the lifestyle that went with it just wasn't a good fit for what I wanted out of my life. I've always known I wanted to be a mum and to be a very present figure in my family. So working 14-hour days and very on-off lifestyle just wasn't going to fit with what I wanted as a mum and, part of my family. So about 6 years ago now, my now husband sort of floated the idea of moving to France. I obviously said yes. And when we moved, I took the opportunity to sort of start fresh and try and find something else to do professionally that could support my life, and ended up working with some really cool small businesses in their marketing teams, which translated really quite nicely from the film work. There's like a left brain, right brain side of set decoration. It's very creative, also like really logistic and organization focused as well. So I enjoyed that, but I still felt kind of like it wasn't perfectly fitting what I wanted. And when my son was born, it just all solidified like, okay, I need to be in charge of my schedule and only work with people who kind of give me energy, not take energy from me. Yeah. And therefore, I started my own business after doing some training to really solidify what I was offering people. And I took a really cool boot camp about what's called user experience. So taking a very user customer focused perspective on websites and making sure that they are easy and logical and helpful to the people you're trying to serve. And that's where the empathy piece fits in really nicely, of always looking at your business and at your website and branding from the customer's perspective to make it as easy and appealing to them as possible.
That's an awesome story, because I think as well, like your backstory in terms of film, you've probably been very, you've become an expert at observing. And when we look at things objectively through a lens, like not just through a camera, but you're probably experiencing your business now is like, it's kind of like film in a way of like, you're filming them through your eyes and you're watching that movie objectively, like, okay, like how do I portray this in a certain way that maybe that business needs to be exposed to the world, or how do I need to view this to be effective in my team? And I think that's a really cool transition that you've made there. Like, have you always been a people observer from a very young age, or was that learned through your film?
I think naturally I'm a fairly empathetic person. I have two much younger sisters, and I think that really informed me. I've always been very maternal. And I think that sense of putting people and relationships first is core to me. But I agree that the filter of film, of thinking about story and character and people essentially first, is something that I really took on board and I think follows me through everything I do.
Yeah. Has technology, the perspective of technology changed for you since leaving the film industry? Because I can imagine back in the day it was quite different to how it is now, and so many things are filmed on a camera that don't have all of those intricate settings that
Yeah.
you were probably so mastered in that it's like, people can get away with filming things on an iPhone and it looks incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's become more popularized to make your own films, and I love that side of things. What I will say is that there's a mastery to making anything that looks good and is really convincing, and I think that works with film websites, whatever it is that's telling kind of a story or being a experience. If it's done with mastery and with the right intention, it can be amazing regardless if you are filming on the highest tech equipment or not. But I do, there's something interesting that's been popping up with this like virtual reality set design and creation, like The Mandalorian, which my husband's obsessed with. And personally, I don't really love it. I love that kind of physicality and the connection to the real and the true. One of my like passions in film is stop motion animation and claymation. I just find it so compelling and so beautiful to see that effort and that care and attention. So I've always been really attracted to things that are real and feel connected to people in some way, something real.
I have not heard of claymation since I've been in primary school. That is
Oh no.
amazing because I loved it. Like, and it's the smallest of
Hmm.
movements. And I think,
Yeah.
again, coming back to people observing and paying attention to detail is something that with kind of knowing you barely from a bar of soap, I know that that is something that you would prize in not only your relationship
Hmm.
with your partner, but your kid and the people that you work with. So, like, in terms of empathy and all of that
Mm.
side of the work that you use today, have you chosen your field with working with mothers and babies because you personally connected with that, or that you didn't really find there was an avenue for men connecting with that in business?
I think a lot of it comes from having been very much in that state of being a new mum when all of this popped up.
Yeah.
And I think there was some very defining moments for me just before starting my business where I was struggling postpartum. We had some challenges and I really needed help and I
Mhm.
couldn't find it. And I, not to dig too much into my personal struggles, but we had a lot of trouble with my son latching for breastfeeding, and it's not particularly common in France to breastfeed. And I ended up seeing multiple doctors and specialists, and nobody understood or really sympathized with our challenge until I met an American specialist who immediately saw, because Americans are much more raised and understanding breastfeeding, she immediately got it. And I just was so thankful I'd found her, but it was through the most obscure path. And so when I was trying to think of people who really needed access to information and who needed help, obviously the new mum in me was just screaming that like these are the people who need to find stuff easily and quickly and usually on their phones in the middle of the night. So making websites for those type of people really hit home for me.
Could you define your terminology of empathy versus
Mm.
sympathy?
Ooh, I love that question. I think sympathy can have a slightly, not negative, but slightly demeaning element to it of not quite putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but just feeling that, they're sad and that's a hard feeling for someone else to go through. Empathy is really for me about putting yourself in those shoes and really trying to wrap your head around what that other person, that other perspective is, trying to kind of feel the feelings and be in those shoes versus just acknowledging that they exist, which is what sympathy maybe feels slightly more like for me.
Totally. I'll see if I can find a little picture to send to you, because there's this beautiful image of where sympathy, this might resonate with you because I know that you like images and all of that kind of stuff, but there's this beautiful photo of where it's like sympathy, they become the pain as well, or they become the struggle. So it's like you buy into it and it's like you're sharing the exact same brain waves. But with empathy, it's like when the hands touch, it's like it unravels all of the cords, and it's like it's this beautiful feeling of like, when you look at it, of like, oh, I understand you, I'm not drawn into the struggle, like I can relate to you, but I can also step back and be the witness. So I love your description.
Yeah, I completely see that. And I agree that there is some sense of also stepping out that's important in empathy, that it's not drawing you into the struggle or the perspective, but you still have that objectivity, which is so helpful.
100%. So like with the clients that you have coming to you, do you find that it's just, do you feel like they reflect a really similar story as to the kind of the people that you get in? It's like, oh, that sounds like me because that's what you're putting out there. Or do you get people who like challenge you to like, oh my gosh, I've never kind of had that question before?
I mean, I love when people think of things differently than I do or have a different perspective. So I kind of revel in that. But I do think there is a common thread of empathy and putting people first and having that mission behind a business, that it's not a money-making machine, but usually there's a through line of people who want to make an impact, who want to do something bigger than themselves and help other people, and coming from that place of service or of wanting to put something out in the world that's positive. I think that's a very clear through line.
Yeah. I can just imagine, I can almost just imagine mamas messaging you through the night, like just being where you've been. And it would just be so uncanny to you, like, they'd connect and really, I can almost just visualize that your messages would be like, I've been there before, like we're gonna get through this. So it's like, could you just like quickly step through how you actually approach taking on your clients and what that looks like in terms of understanding empathy in business, and how you really do move them from the place that they're in that stuckness to really thriving? Because I see you as someone who is quite successful in what you do, and you've come from a place of struggle. So I always find that story quite compelling.
Yeah. So when I'm getting to know someone before we've even decided to work together, I always like to give people space to sort of spill out whatever is holding them back. I think it's really important to let them speak to whatever it is they're struggling with, even if afterwards, oftentimes that's not really the core of the problem, but it's so important to let people feel heard and to take on board what is top of mind. But once we've actually started working together, I like to dig quite deep into really what the business is about, why they started their business, what's the mission behind everything that they're doing, and try and simplify in many ways the core of their branding and their business into something quite distilled, so that we have these like concrete pillars to hold on to as we move forward. And I think that guiding principle is almost always their mission and their ideal clients. And if we can define those things clearly, everything else flows. And I think that's, as you said, the empathy is empathizing with them through their mission, through their values, through their beliefs, and then empathizing with their clients, their customers, and what they're looking for, and trying to find the solution that meets both of those needs.
Yeah. How quickly does that kind of evolve for your mamas?
Yeah. It can go pretty quickly. I like to give the first sort of 2 weeks of us working together. Usually I do sort of 6 to 8 week packages. And the first 2 weeks, we really dive into the branding side of things, but also what I call the strategy. And that's never been quite the right word for me, but to dive into sort of the why and the wherefore of their business and understand the core pieces of what they need, the solutions, and then also what they want, which is more the results. So usually within those 2 weeks, we've pretty much figured out the core of what they actually need. And then the rest of it is implementing on that.
Wow. And so like when I see you and I think for you to have gotten through that stage that you've been through, and it always just fascinates me with culture of like you just assume that everything is the same kind of where you live, and I just can't even imagine that France would not have that support. So like how did you manage your self-care through that time and essentially build the village around you? Because that's what motherhood was designed to be, right? Like it's not just about having your husband, and it's not just about your kid filling a space that is this, like filling a part of you
Yeah.
that you didn't fulfill. Like we're here to build as community. Like how do you look after you and build on your own self-empathy and self-love and self-care?
I mean, I think everybody's on a journey there. And I think the postpartum experience is very testing. And when you have a struggle, it's incredibly testing. But I think in many ways, holding true to my principles and my desire to, do the best by my son, but also to have that experience of breastfeeding and of, attachments. It was so important to me that I was willing to go through the struggles. In many, many places I could have made our lives easier by bottle feeding and going through formula. And I just didn't feel like that would have been kind to myself of what I really wanted. And in some ways that was my mission. So holding true to that helped me feel really strong in what I was doing, even when we were sleepless nights and, challenging times. I think having that pillar of what you really are looking for, the guiding light to run towards, really helped me. And I'm very, very fortunate. I have an incredibly supportive husband who was just 100% on my team and couldn't really have asked for anyone better to be in the trenches with, especially because my family was still in Australia. So it was just our little village of three for a lot of those early months.
Yeah, the village side of things is so huge. It really hits me like smack bang in the center of my heart when I hear about it, because
Yeah.
like, family, we do have our blood related family, then our clients can be our family, but sometimes it's that point of difference of when we're not operating in business and where we draw the line in our
Yeah.
boundaries and how much we share with our clients, because as women we get really quite drawn into that, like the emotional side of things. So like where
Mm.
do you draw the line with boundaries and how you work and operate in business? Because people would be wanting you at all times, I can imagine.
That's a really great question and something I struggled with a lot before my son was born. And I felt, as you say, like the desire and maybe the obligation to be available to everyone. But I am so committed to being present with him that it's made it a lot easier to shut out other pieces. Not to say I win at that battle every day, but I try. And we've decided to keep him at home until he starts school, which is very soon. Um, so I've really got him, in the next room playing with his nanny for the few hours a day I work. And that makes it even more important that that time is used for work. And I need to use as much of it as powerfully as I can, because when I close my laptop, I want to be 100% with him. I think that really helps clarify that space for me, even if I don't 100% do it every day.
It's a practice, right? Like we
Hmm.
sometimes we understand the intellectual side of it and where
Yeah.
we need to be or what we should be doing, but again, we're all human. We have things that come up that doesn't
Life is
look
messy.
perfect. It is messy.
Yeah.
And it's about
And
riding
I
the
think
messy middle.
exactly, exactly. And that's a challenge I've been struggling with because I have a connection to Australia. I really love Australians, just there's always something there. But the time difference is tough in France. And that's a battle I have to pick if I want to talk to an Australian. It means working when my son is usually with me. And that's something I have to kind of weigh up each time of what's more urgent, what's more important. Can I make space for this or can I not?
I have a beautiful friend from Australia who has recently moved to France, so I might have to connect with
Oh,
her. She's
please.
awesome.
There's a
Yeah.
pretty big community here where, as you know, Australians love traveling, so they're everywhere.
100%. It's really cool to see you step into that feminine energy of really being like acknowledging to be present, even when it's a
Mm.
challenge. So I'm kind of curious to even put the question out there, like, have you thought about where your business will lead to when your son grows up? Or is it like, let
Mm.
me just ride that wave and I'll figure it out when I get there?
I think I've got both of those feelings at the same time. I really love this idea of being the mum who picks him up from school, and if he has a sick day, being there. That's a really crystal clear piece of what my future and his future holds. So building my business so that that can stay true is front and center of the any further growth in my business. But I do still have obviously hopes and dreams of things growing and expanding. I love working with other creatives and just really, really hoping to build more partnerships and that kind of collaboration would be really exciting. But I think holding true to this business is to complement my life and not to impede it or support it. It's really for me to build simultaneously my family and my work together.
Yeah, definitely. Are you as a family someone like do you move a lot? Like do you see yourself moving around the world?
Oh, I grew up like that and I am comfortable assimilating somewhat anywhere, but I really love the idea of being more stable, especially for my son. And since we've settled in France, I really am happy here. But the door is always open, and my husband and I do talk about maybe America one day again, maybe Australia one day again, and we'll see where life takes us. I'm open. That's you have to adapt.
You are awesome. And if you're ever over back in Australia, just let me know. We're in Western
Oh, please.
Australia at the moment and we can
Well, I
catch
have
up
family over
more.
there, so that would be lovely.
In Western Australia or where
Yep,
particularly?
near Perth, Bunbury. I was born in Perth, so I'm really from your neck of the woods.
Isn't this just crazy with technology? Like this is the side of like even how we've come to have this Zoom chat. Like it just blows my
Yeah,
mind of the resonance that you get through technology, the
it
synchronicity,
is.
and like and you'd get it in your business too. Like there's this expansiveness that just wouldn't exist without technology. It's like, how did we ever do it
I completely
before?
agree. There's a fun story my mum and I keep batting around. She left home to go to, she is from Queensland and went to school in Western Australia. And she wrote letters to her parents. And that was the only form of communication they had until they went home. And I left home at 18 to study in America. And we had Skype by then. And she just, every time she's like, this is so different. And our relationship is so strong because we have the technology to help us speak. And I revel in the fact that our world is so open because of this. It's really amazing. I think it's made the world so much smaller and so much more accessible. I love that.
Does it scare you or excite you for the amount of growth that's going on with technology for what your kids and your like your clients' kids are going to experience? Is that something that
Yeah.
you ever discuss with them or that they discuss with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am optimistic by nature, so I obviously hope that it will grow in a way that's complementary to, the positive parts of humanity. But I do see my little 2-year-old pretty obsessed with the TV and the phone, and that is a bit worrying. But I think on the whole, as a human species, we're generally pretty kind. And I think we do have good intentions for the most part. So I hope that those decisions are in hands that will make good choices. And if not, then I think that the communities are pretty good about making that righted if it's wrong. So I'm hopeful.
I love that
Cautiously
you're on the
optimistic.
optimistic side of the fence. Woo! Let's do that.
Hoping.
Because I think if we don't adapt to change and we don't roll with it, then we could find
Yeah.
so many negative things with it, right? Like, and you'd find that with
Yeah.
the people that get drawn to you of like their fears and their struggles. And again, if we stepped into, just for like a real life example, if you stepped into sympathy in those moments, you actually wouldn't be able to help them. But if you can step
No,
into,
you get bogged down.
yeah, you get bogged down and you go, yeah, it's terrible, or I'm fearful, or it's bringing up all my insecurities. And you know, it's almost like you both just sitting there drinking at the bar, like, this is terrible. Like, yeah, it's terrible. Let's have another one. And it's like, actually, no, I can see clearly now the rain has gone, and let's come in here and figure out a solution to move with the change and not step always into that resistance side of like I love a good devil's advocate, but when we're always in that stage of like resisting, it becomes like you're blocking your own flow.
Well, I think in many ways, any movement is better than no movement. So even if it's not perfect, even if it is uncomfortable, it's still better to move because you'll eventually move forward. If you don't move, you will get sucked back. So I think that's, it's better to just try and hope in some ways.
I would love to know how your pregnancy went. I know that probably seems a little bit random, but if you could speak to that and the process of like moving away from family, because I can imagine it would be this time of like extreme feeling of love and fullness, and to move away from all of the familiarity to like starting a new life and being with the man that you love, but then also feeling a sense of, what am I doing?
So I was living just with my husband in America for many years. My family moved back to Australia. So actually coming to France, I was closer to family because his parents are here. But I knew I wanted to have kids, but I've unfortunately struggled with a pretty debilitating medical phobia most of my life. So this was my Everest to have a child. And I was really proactive, and I tried to find some help and went to see many different, psychiatrists, psychologists, and I found someone who really, really helped me through it. And we were able to get through the pregnancy pretty seamlessly. And I had a very positive birth experience, which I really thought was impossible for me. And it's just been a pretty life-changing experience because I was passing out having my blood taken before, and I went through a birth, obviously medicated. I wasn't going to make it without that, but with pretty much no scratches. And it just didn't seem like that was something I could do. And I did it somewhat on my own in France. And I'm incredibly proud to have been able to get through that experience. And it feels like anything after that. Like, well, it can't be that hard.
Girl, like I think any mother is like a queen. I just, and not in the sense of like just the woman herself, but it's like the divine feminine, and it's like coming back to the earth, and we call her she, the earth, the mother, all of that kind of thing. And it incorporates both the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. So it's like, I feel like from whatever you were speaking to with the debilitating medical side of it, it sounds like it was more of a psychological block that started to manifest in your whole body. I don't know if you want to speak to it. If it's too personal, that's okay, but I would love to hear about it.
That's fine. Yeah, no, I grew up around a lot of medical world. My parents are doctors, and I think I just internalized a lot of anxiety around it. And the process I went through with this therapist is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it was really about like controlled exposure and learning to connect what's happening with my body to what's happening in my head. And that really, really helped me manage my symptoms of anxiety and of the phobia. And I think connecting myself back to my body and feeling in control of it was huge when I was in a state where panic attacks would literally dehumanize me. I would drift out of my consciousness, and I felt so far from my body. And that was very scary with the idea of something like childbirth, where you kind of need your body to work. But her process was just incredibly helpful at connecting all that back and helping me feel in charge of my body again. So I'm a huge advocate. I think it's great.
Wow. Would you have taught your parents a great deal, like coming from an extremely medical background with like doctors and stuff like that? I can imagine it was quite scientific, but as we understand when we move into things like, feminine or intuition, it's like it can feel like there's nothing to back it up other than a gut feeling. So that would be, it would be pretty interesting to bring up with people who have that scientific background of like, prove it. It's like, I can't, I'm just feeling this way, or I don't have a word for that, or I don't have an article for that. It doesn't make sense to me in these scientific terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been interesting to talk with them more about it, and I think seeing kind of the results has helped them understand how important that process was to me. I'm a pretty scientific person in the way I see the world, and I needed to see something concrete. But I also feel like just acknowledging it as a problem was one of the bigger hurdles. And I think that listening to those things that don't feel quite right, that don't sit right, and taking that seriously is, I think, the core of pretty much our human existence, but also kind of a medical practice. Like if something's wrong, they try and diagnose it. And that's really understandable, even if something that's wrong isn't medical or isn't physical. It's still there's something that's wrong and needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I love that. It's like kudos to you as well for anyone really, like who's listening or watching, who doesn't feel like something's right. And it's not about accepting it as what it is and going, well, that's just how it's always going to be. It's like looking for other options, right? Like we start reading, and I mean, Google can tell you have cancer, but it can also be an incredible resource for linking you to books or podcasts or music. And so I'd love to know what you turn to when you look for evidence or studies that really helps you solidify your understanding. You strike me as someone who would probably go to quite incredibly credible resources that are like, probably I wouldn't understand reading them, but speak to that.
Yeah, no, I do. I put weight in like the trusted resources that you mentioned, but I also really like hearing about personal experiences. And I think when I was struggling with breastfeeding with my son, sure, there's a lot of articles out there that tell you about like the optimum latch, but actually seeing it is much, much easier to understand and kind of figure out that there's something wrong. So I think there is something to experiencing and seeing other people and that human connection that I really value as well when making any kind of decision. And I think that, research is twofold. It's, the intellectual and the experiential. And I like to take that through kind of any research I do. It's both.
Yeah, totally. So just to get you completely random, what was your last Google search? What was the last book you read? And what was the last podcast that you listened to?
Oh, I'll do them opposite order. So I'm obsessed with Freakonomics, the podcast. My sister is an economist, and I'm trying really hard to understand her world. And this has been the best way I've come in, even though I know it's like light economics, but I just love that podcast.
Yes.
It's fantastic. So that's definitely the last one I've listened to. Book I read, I think I read the one Start With Why. I forget who it's written by, but it's really, yes, very good. It's a really cool way to think about things. It's again that like analytical, empathetic approach that I really like. So that one. And then last Google search, probably for like, I don't know. I think I was looking for checkout cart options and something fun and intellectual like that. But that I was probably Googling for like stock photography. Nothing particularly exciting.
Girl, I am, you know what's so bizarre? Like how synchronistic things work out like that. Like literally a day or two ago, at my house, I live with my sister and her partner. It's this really awesome vibe. Every night with dinner, we'll have like our little gratitude practice, but then we'll watch a video on something that's like really nutritional for our mind. And the one that I loved watching was the Simon Sinek Start With Why. And so for the people who haven't heard this, it's like, you know, we often start with what and like what we're doing. And it's like, hi, I'm Michelle and I do this. And it's like you tell them what you're doing. And it's so easy to objectify, like, hi, I'm Lauren and I'm a yoga teacher or blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't care. Like, what is the why behind how you do what you do? And when we know our why, it's so much more compelling, because he gives the beautiful example of like Apple. Like there's so many places that are selling computers or technological things, but it's like the why behind Apple is why people keep buying those products. And I'm sure that's something that you probably even bring into your business work without your clients really even having to know that. And, you know, it's really coming down to know why you do what you do, and then the how.
And why people should care.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
It's very cool.
So cool. Are you and your sister like super, super different?
So I have two sisters and they're both quite different, although I can see a lot of similarities. But I've got 6.5 and 9.5 years difference. And growing up, I felt really close to them. And then it was a little distant when I left home, but I've been really happy to reconnect and grow these wonderful like adult relationships with my sisters. And it's just been really cool to discover who they are like as their own people. And I don't see them as much as I'd want to, but yeah, we're very close.
Yeah, aren't sisters the best? Like, I just
So good.
so good. Like, do you desire to have another child to give that gift to your son, or is that something that's like, don't even ask me here, Lauren, I'm not exposing that, because that's totally cool as well.
We're still thinking about it, but I think it's hard when you're in the trenches of the little kid years to think of going back. But I did love having siblings, and I really love that dynamic. So we'll see.
What's your greatest message that you want to bring? What's your boy's name? Tell me your son's name.
It's Louis.
Louis. Hello, Louis.
My little cutie guy.
We love Louis. And what do you envision Louis being like when he grows up, modeling how you are in this world now? Like all of the work you do is you've got your why behind what you do. I'm asking all the big questions and I'm pumping them out.
I know you are.
Yeah. Get clear.
I don't really know who he'll be, and in many ways I don't care. Like as long as he's a good person who wants to bring something good to the world, I'm happy. I think being kind and putting yourself in other people's shoes is something I really hope that he'll learn and we can impart on him, because I do think that is the kind of core of humanity and having a happy life. And I think I've been, I've had a challenging childhood and challenging upbringing, but I think so has everyone. And the perspective of trying to find the happiness in life has been something I'm really grateful that comes to me naturally. And I'd love to see him also be someone who can find the bright side in everything.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Little Louis. I love the name Louis. That's just like...
It was hard to find a boy's name that works in French and in English.
Do you say it like Louis? Louis? No, I'm butchering it. I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah, is Louis and Louis. So really pretty close.
Oh, so beautiful. Yes, I love that. Oh, so like if there was one, not even one thing, I'm not even going to limit it to that, but in terms of people being able to take a really valuable and practical approach to the work that you do, like both men and women and what they do. I know you work specifically with mothers and babies and empathy in business, but if there's one piece of advice that you would give to business owners, what would it be?
I think it's easy to say like the customer comes first. And in many ways, I do stand by that. But I think just putting yourself in the shoes of your customer when making decisions that impact them is a huge piece to making loyal and happy audience that will serve your business. And ultimately, it does kind of serve you to put yourself in their shoes, to really think through how you can make things as easy and enjoyable as possible, because without clients, you don't have a business, and without a happy business, in some ways, there's no point in all of this. Online or offline, there's no point in having a business that isn't working for you. So I'd say thinking about your clients in those moments, whether it's your website or not, whenever you're introducing or impacting them, I think really helps.
Yeah, I love that. So can people work with you virtually, or are you more an in-person gal?
So I haven't worked with anyone in person yet. I tend to work in English because that's what comes most naturally. And a lot of times digging into sort of the nitty gritty, I would maybe feel slightly less confident in French. So it's something I want to try, but I'm working mostly with people across the world. I've had Australians, Americans, Brits, Norwegian. So I'm open to working with anyone who speaks English. I would love to learn other languages, but that's a challenge for another day. But yeah, I really like the virtual work environment too, because in many ways, it clarifies things. Like you hop on the call and you're there with them during that moment, but then you hop off the call and you can go and do the work and be present in the other parts of your business. So I actually really like it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I reckon we've both probably been through that period where you resist it because it feels like so much of a filter or so much of a barrier that it's like, oh, I don't feel like I can help them in the way that I would be in person. But it's like, actually, it serves you both so well because, again, like you get to see the mamas when they've just woken up or when it's the middle of the night, or I don't know like what situations you've been in, but I'm sure it's like that where it's like, they're not looking perfect and things aren't great. So it's like actually you meet them where they're at and you take them from where they are now to where they're going. And I think that's a really incredible thing, that like we don't need to look perfect on a Zoom. Like I certainly do not look perfect right now, and it's like / never do / never aspire to look perfect or be perfect, because we don't want to set that standard that we are trying to teach them to go, show me who you are, tell me who you are. And if you're always looking like, oh, I'm happy and everything's good, it's like that's when you probably won't be attracting the clients, because a lot of people get drawn into the story that they can relate meaning to, right?
Yeah, they want to meet the person, and I think you want to deal with people. I mean, ultimately, we're social beings, and I think in a weird way, Zoom, all the other technologies like it, but this virtual way of working is really cool because you're in people's houses and it's oddly kind of a vulnerable situation, but I really love that it takes down some of those walls that we built up culturally to be like professional and polished, and that didn't really serve any purpose. I think, knowing those people who they really are, and as you say, meet them where they're at, I think it cuts to the chase. We can get to know each other for real. I really like that.
I love it too. And I think it breaks down the wall of loneliness as well, which is one of the most, like, they talk about COVID being an epidemic or whatnot, but I think like sleep deprivation, loneliness, and stress, if we cured that, 100% all the entrepreneurs or small businesses would be out of work.
Bold claims, but I don't think you're wrong. I do think there's so much that we do to ourselves that is is kind of unfair that we burden ourselves with all this extra stuff when life is hard enough. And I think anything you can do to make that easier if you're lonely to connect, even if it's not perfect, but just like, as we said, some movement is better than nothing. And I think in many ways, finding that community, if you can't find them locally, is still a powerful thing. And that connection is still meaningful, even if you've never seen that person in real life.
Well, it's like how we met. So like a great segue to people being able to reach out to Michelle if you're at that point where you're going, wow, my story super relates to her and where she's been at, or just even the way that you deliver information. And if that resonates, you know, how I came across Michelle was putting my content out there, and she was beautiful enough to get back. And, you know, that was all online. So it's like, I'm not someone who is able to connect in person with all of the people that I get on these episodes. So like for people to listen to that, to see this, and we can still have such a raw and authentic conversation. So like, how can people get in contact with you in terms of whether it's just personal? How do you prefer to be contacted if it's professional? And all of that juicy information. I'll include that in the show notes, but I'll get you to speak to the best platform.
Yeah. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Michelle Pontvert. We'll spell it because it's slightly tricky. Pontvert. There's like a hidden T in the middle.
Yeah.
And then I'm happy to meet people where they're most comfortable hanging out. But I do love if someone is curious about working together to just hop on a call and see how we get on and see if it's a good fit. I really believe in making sure it's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship. So I would say to head over to my website and sort of submit a little info, and we'll hop on a call and see if we can work together or not. You know, I'm always happy to refer people along if it isn't me that they're looking for. So I definitely recommend, if people are looking for help, to just reach out and start that journey, take a step forward, and it will help you ultimately get wherever you're trying to go.
And again, like, don't hesitate if you reach out to Michelle and it doesn't feel like the right fit, or, you know, like, these things take time and we have to be gentle with ourselves. But the way that Michelle is, it's like you can already tell that she's super humble to not be selling you a deal before you've even chatted. And I think that's such a wonderful offering with what you do, is like, let's have a chat, let's see if it works. Because sometimes when we're throwing things in the face of like, you have to come on here and you have to do this because it worked for me, it's like, actually, I'm a completely different person in a different environment with a different situation. So the great thing about Michelle is that she has a beautiful quality of listening. She wants to hear your story and then be able to guide you to the place that you need to go. And like many of us in the small business or entrepreneurial business in general, we don't feel like we need to take everyone on. So like, if you're chatting with Michelle and she goes, okay, like I really hear your story, that's not my forte, I'm sure you've got like a network of people around you that you can connect these people to, or maybe even connect clients who have a similar story. And that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love being the connector of people. So I actually find a lot of joy if it isn't me to pass along, because I just see people I like or people I think could help each other, and that's in some ways as much of a win for me as booking someone myself. So I'm always very happy when I can make that happen.
100%. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, beautiful Michelle. It's been an
You're very
absolute
welcome.
pleasure. Like, I love
Yeah.
your grounded energy. It's so interesting because I feel like I mold and I shape shift to the people that I have on, and sometimes I can be like, rah, like crazy, but then it's like, love that you have this incredible feminine energy that makes me just want to
Oh.
listen and to connect to the connection of like, I'm just
Mm.
enjoying being around your energy, and it's really refreshing.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely to hear. And it's always fun when you meet someone and it's just flows. It's easy and a good connection. And I always am like really, really happy when that happens. So it was great that we were able to just connect like that so easily.
It's been awesome. And if you ever have any questions or if you have any projects that you're putting out there that you want to spread wider
Mm,
to the Australian community of something that touches home
yeah.
to you, just send me an email or a message. And I want to be able to support you as much as you're supporting all of the beautiful humans out there. And it's, it's the thing in business is that you're not just helping the people that you're directly helping. It's like showing up for your
Yeah.
husband, and it's showing up for your kid and your family. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's like the chain of good. If you do one thing, it can help someone else do a good thing. And I just love that.
Yeah, 100%. Thank
Well,
you,
thank
Beauty.
you.
And we'll have a little encore of you coming back on. I'm trying to get a system of like getting a few people through all of these podcasts, and then I would love to do like a revisitation of everyone that's come on to
Yeah.
go like, hey, we've got her back and we're seeing whether she's like still doing the same thing, or yeah, it'll be super
That's so
fun.
cool. I love that idea.
It'll be great. So it'll be cool because your little Louis will be probably 1 by then.
Oh, he'll be in school soon.
Oh my
Goodness
God.
me, it goes
Yeah, he's
fast.
like well above 1. For some reason, I'm just thinking he's like a fresh born, but it's like no, he's well past.
Oh gosh, I'm glad not anymore. As adorable as he was, I'm very happy he's growing and bigger.
Oh, amazing. Yay. Cool, girl. Well, we shall wrap this up. I'm sure it's not only me who has gained value from this, but all of my beautiful listeners and viewers. So be sure to give us a share, a like, or a comment. Let us know what you loved, what you really took out of this. And if there's anything from Michelle that you want to know and you haven't reached out to her directly, you can get in contact with me and I'll pass that on to her. So again, it's all about connection, and that's exactly why we're here today. So thank you, Beauty. Have the most incredible evening in France. And yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you. I hope that we'll get to do this again in a couple months. I love that idea.
You absolutely will, girl. It's going to be awesome.